Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. As you guys can see, Bitcoin is breaking out once again, and we talked a lot about this in yesterday's video, jumping into the shorter time frames, analyzing our inverse head and shoulder. I wanted to touch up on some of the prior analysis, talking a little bit more about our price targets, and then I wanted to be talking about what happens once we see Bitcoin go into price discovery, because as you guys can see, Bitcoin is currently on the verge of going into a brand new all-time high again, and this is always the moment before we see the most altcoin profits roll through. So I wanted to map out the shifting point, when we're going to expect to see that to happen, so you guys can stay best prepared and positioned to make the most money possible over the next couple months. Guys, if you find any value, please do me a favor, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. For anybody that wants to see how I'm investing my portfolio long term, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up on my website. Now guys, in the shorter time frames, yesterday we talked a lot about this inverse head and shoulder target, because this is the main thing I've been watching for. I was wondering if we were going to actually end up breaking out of this, and as you guys can see, in yesterday's video I talked about how we could potentially see one more low to this level here. We didn't end up seeing that. We just held the support. And as you guys can see over the last, 6 hours, we've seen a pretty big breakout to the upside. In the shorter time frames, it does look like we're going to be getting a confirmed breakout. Even if we pulled back in here and did something like this, it wouldn't change anything. I'm still anticipating that this is a breakout. And once again, guys, because we were targeting this inverse head and shoulder, it gives us a target based off of from the high of the neckline all the way down to the head. And then we can come down here, and basically from the breakout point, we can get a target that's going to be taking us just barely above those prior all-time highs. But, our main target that I've been telling you guys is these prior all-time highs. If we're going to see a breakout of this inverse head and shoulder, which it's looking like we just did, then at that point, we're expecting this thing to actually go into a brand new all-time high, because all this is in the shorter time frames is just the very beginning subwaves. This was a wave 1, this was a wave 2. We're getting ready for wave 3. Probably that takes us into a new all-time high in the shorter time frames. Maybe that's the next move, before we get into a retest of those highs, before we make another one even higher than that. I was trying this to go into 100K, and I still think that that could easily be the case. This wave 3 could extend up here pretty hard, and then we could get an even bigger 5 wave all the way up to 100K. And I still anticipate something along these lines. I was mainly just drawing, in the shorter time frames where we were expecting to go. Just the inverse head and shoulder target gives us a target of these prior all-time highs. So if we're looking at the next wave count coming in, chances are it's going to be a pretty big one. So I think that the main reason we're looking for such an impulsive move has everything to do with the level that we just flipped. We just broke out of these all-time highs, right? Now, we've been retesting them, consolidating on top of them as new support, and the big reason why I was telling you guys that we're much better off being bullish in these times is because we were really just sitting right on top of that 65K cluster. Remember how when we topped at 65K, we had all of this rounded top type price action right before we ended up selling off? That was an important level. And then when we actually went into the new all-time high, we temporarily got back above that. And even though we just barely went into another new all-time high before selling back down, this level has been the most important one on the chart. As far as our all-time high, we've had multiple different reactions below it as resistance. The one time we got above it instantly resulted in a sell-off, and we can see that that was really where we got confirmation of that close shortly after. So leading into where we're at right now, all we were doing was sitting on top of that as support. We had all of these different reactions on this level as support, all of these failed attempts to actually close below. Keep in mind that we still have 4.5 days left before this weekly closes. Bitcoin could flip bearish. We don't have any sort of confirmation on the bigger time frames yet. But what I knew was, us sitting on this level on the bigger time frames was more bullish than it was bearish, especially after just such a big move we just saw. I know that a lot of people were anticipating that this thing was going to sell off, but I've made the constant thesis that, if we look at every single one of these pullbacks up to this point to begin our cycle, not only have the pullbacks been smaller, 20%, this one was another 19, 20%, something like that. Not only have the pullbacks been smaller the entire way back up, but then the impulses to the way up have been bigger than they've ever been and quicker. So we're looking at something that's just unique to all of our prior cycles, and that's why I say you're much better off just buying in these times. We're not trying to predict the exact price. I honestly think that because we're front running, this is an early signal that we're going to continue to do more of the same. Now, I'm not saying that we're just going to, not follow a normal 4-year cycle and we're going to top early. And in the last couple of videos, I've mapped out the 4-year cycles explaining why I think that this could just be more of an impulsive normal 4-year cycle, where we still have the 3-year bull market, where it's still just as normal as all of the other bull markets. However, the only difference is it's just much more parabolic. We've talked a lot about that scenario, and I still think that that's a very valid, thing to be considering. And as we're kind of retesting this, as we're getting this big bullish engulfing candle for Bitcoin, you know, chances are this is the moment before we do go into price discovery. And now I want to talk a little bit about what it means for the altcoins, because historically speaking, once Bitcoin goes to the all-time high, once it goes into a brand new all-time high, that's where we see all of the Bitcoin profit. The people that were accumulating it and holding it throughout here, they begin to rotate back into the altcoins. And that's the moment where all of the big altcoin gains are made. So I want to talk a little bit about what the charts show, how the prior cycles have lined up in years past, and really giving you guys an idea so that you guys can play this market a little bit better. You know, looking over here in the total market cap, this is a little bit lagging because of the altcoins, right? And as Bitcoin is still yet to get outside of this new all-time high and truly enter price discovery, altcoins are going to continue to lag in turn. Now, that's not always going to happen though. We know historically speaking that when we're looking at the long-term basis, we can come over here and actually look at the total market cap of the altcoins, and we can take a look at the Bitcoin dominance, because this is going to be a very important thing to be watching for. Whenever the Bitcoin dominance tops, that's going to be the moment in which we're going to see the altcoin profit rotate, right? We're going to see Bitcoin profit rotate in the alts, and then the altcoins are going to start running. But historically speaking, if we look at each one of the prior cycles and the beginnings of those cycles for altcoins, I'll share with you guys exactly where those were. So in this cycle, the first cycle we saw, it was right when we started to get into new all-time highs that we started to see Bitcoin dominance topping. And it was inside of the very beginning move of that breakout that we really started to see the altcoins pick up in a big way. Now, it wasn't really until right over in here, once we did get that true breakout into new all-time highs, that's when the altcoins dominate, or that's when the Bitcoin dominance really started dropping. And so it was the entire move into price discovery. This is the all-time highs, and this entire line is the price discovery that we went through. It was in that leg in 2017 that we saw the biggest altcoin cycle. Now, in our last cycle, although we made a lot of profits, we can see that it topped right here. And it was pretty much right when Bitcoin made its new all-time high, and it started to actually go up into a new all-time high for, you know, I think it went from like 20,000 to like 25 or 30,000 before the altcoins really started moving in a big way. And so altcoins lagged, but once again in a really similar type of event where we just kind of see the very beginning higher highs of the new trend. We saw pretty much the exact same thing in our last cycle. Once we saw Bitcoin going into the new all-time high, altcoins were just shortly thereafter. And that was the same point that the Bitcoin dominance ended up topping in our last cycle, right? So we can see that from this point here, this big candle right there, all the way up to here was where altcoins ended up outperforming. But our last cycle was very small in comparison. This was the only drop that we saw to give market dominance back into the altcoins, right? Compared to 2017, it was much smaller, and it wasn't even close to the same size. So we're looking at this current cycle playing out in similar ways, understanding that this does look a lot like what we saw before 2017. The only question is, when is the Bitcoin dominance going to be topping here? Because whenever that shift happens, that's where the altcoin profit is going to set in. So when we're looking at the altcoin total market cap and we're sitting, you know, just under these prior all-time highs, we haven't quite made a new all-time high yet. It's really at that same point that we looked at in the last cycle. Because remember, it was in Bitcoin's new all-time high, right? If I remove these drawing tools down here so you can see a little bit better, Bitcoin made the new all-time high right here. And that's why we saw this big green candle. However, they were still below their prior all-time highs. Altcoins didn't break out still. And it was inside of that move. Once Bitcoin went up to like $30,000, the altcoins finally started to do the same thing. But altcoins started outperforming the second Bitcoin broke out and went to that new all-time high. There was a couple green candles into price discovery, and then that was when this chart topped, and all of that profit went back into the altcoins. So when we're looking at this on the long-term basis, approaching our major descending resistance, we're looking at altcoins right at that prior all-time high, really close to breaking out. Bitcoin is about to be entering price discovery on this next move. It's lining up that we're about to see another major shifting point for money to rotate back into the altcoin markets. And so this is where we're going to make the majority of our profit, because every single cycle, you know, you take your Bitcoin profits, you rotate back into the altcoins once Bitcoin goes into new all-time highs. And we haven't seen that yet. Even though we technically made a new all-time high at 74K, I wouldn't say that this was really price discovery, because we had to come back down and retest it, cement that this is actually true support before we can get that next move. And so now that we're just starting at that retest, we're going to be getting that next leg up. And I do think that this is going to be that move where we do see that shift taking place inside of the altcoins. Now, one of the other charts that we've been looking at here is really comparing how identical our market cycles look in the altcoins and seeing how right at this point of breaking out of the new all-time highs and just consolidating above them, it looks very similar similar to the cycle that we're currently in right now. The only difference is it's taking more time to create the same type of moves. So when we're looking at our next cycle being a 2017 type of bull run where we have way more altcoin profit than ever before, we're going to have to expect to see that that shifting point comes if we're going to ever end up seeing that type of a cycle. Now, when I look at the Bitcoin dominance always being in a downtrend, I do think that once this thing ends up topping in here, which could be a little bit higher, I wouldn't be surprised if we run up to 58%, even 59%. Once this thing ends up topping in here, I think we're going to go into a brand new all-time low. And it will be the first cycle since that 2017 bull run where the altcoins actually have, gone into new all-time highs against their Bitcoin ratios. There's always certain outperformers that do that. Solana did it last cycle, Phantom, Luna. There's always going to be new altcoins that do that. But the old altcoins that haven't really done anything, I do think that we're going to still continue to see them do really well. We will see a cycle where the conglomerate of different altcoins end up outperforming their Bitcoin ratios. It's just that we're at that point right now where we're looking at the altcoins, pretty much right here close to those prior all-time highs in the same way that they've been in prior cycles. Coming over here and looking at where we circled, altcoins were still way below their all-time highs, right? It was in this move that Bitcoin went into price discovery, and altcoins still hadn't even made it past their all-time highs. But once, that money ended up rotating out of Bitcoin, the altcoins shot up like rockets, and that's what always happens every cycle. So when we're zooming out and we're seeing a lot of the same thing, right here in structure is pretty similar to where we were at right over here. Bitcoin's now looking like it's going to be going into that brand new all-time high, just like we've seen in prior cycles. That's where the shift is going to take place. And so if we're looking at the same similarities in market structure, we're really not that far off. To me, it just looks exactly the same. Once we finish out this retest, which we can see altcoins lagging and underperforming in here, it's really just dominated by Bitcoin. I do think that once this next leg up takes place, that's really where we're going to see this sort of a shift happen inside of this market cycle. This cycle is lining up to be much more powerful than anything we've ever seen, and I don't think that it's only going to be dominated by Bitcoin. I do think that there will be a rotation that takes place in the same ways that the markets always have. And my favorite altcoin to really look at when we're looking at when the true rotation is going to take place is always going to end up being Dogecoin. Dogecoin to me is the best example that we have of an altcoin and how they kind of perform in the long-term basis of crypto as a whole. So when we're looking at Bitcoin going into this new all-time high, we can see where all of the points that Doge did the same. This was the move into price discovery for Bitcoin in its first cycle where the altcoins were around. And that was pretty much right here for Dogecoin before we did the same thing. Dogecoin outperformed Bitcoin the entire rest of the way up. And we saw, really the exact same things right here. Once Bitcoin started getting into those new all-time highs and actually went into price discovery here, that was right at the beginning before Dogecoin shot up like a rocket. It did wait a little bit. It took a period of time before we actually got that big breakout. But it was at the moment where Bitcoin went into the new all-time highs that we saw Doge really start outperforming. So when we're zooming out and we're seeing Bitcoin once again sitting at these prior all-time highs, same sort of shifting point we've seen Dogecoin do it in years past, and we're already starting to see Dogecoin making higher highs and higher lows. And Dogecoin currently is just broken out of its bear market bottom and it's sitting on it as new support. So when I look at Dogecoin, it's going to follow the same pattern that it always has. And so all of the altcoins are going to do this for the most part. Not every single one of them, but if this is a cycle that is very much like 2017, which I think it will be, we're going to expect to see that even the most crappy altcoins end up running. We're seeing meme coins blowing up more than anything. Meme coins have outperformed mostly everything this entire cycle. So this is going to be a more retail dominated cycle than ever before. We have so many different chains that exist right now. And inside of these chains, there's a number of different altcoins that we can trade. And it really reminds me a lot of what we saw with Ethereum back in 2016 and 2017. The reason 2017 was so powerful was because Ethereum, gave us so many new ways to add market value between building altcoins, smart contracts, all of these different things. And so when we're zooming out and we're actually taking a look at Bitcoin today, and we're seeing, a lot of the same similarities in 2017. However, we just have thousands of new chains. Instead of one Ethereum, there's thousands of them, and there's going to be entire ecosystems blowing up as a whole. So I think that this is going to be the most powerful cycle that we've ever seen. And when we're looking at the long-term charts, everything is pretty much lining up perfectly with that. Altcoins are at equal points that they were at in their prior cycles, right as Bitcoin went into price discovery. you know, the total market cap sitting on major support, Bitcoin pretty much doing the exact same thing over in here. All we've done is break out of the all-time highs and consolidated on them as new support. And I think that the next part coming is going to be very, very bullish. And that's where we're going to end up seeing that shift into the altcoin. So guys, if you found any value in this, please do me a favor, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. For anybody that wants to see how I'm investing my portfolio long-term, altcoins I'm buying, selling, trading, how I'm going to take profits. When Bitcoin goes into a new all-time high, it's when everybody makes the majority of their profit. And so the best time to be following anything I'm doing is right now. So if you guys do want to get access to that, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up on my website. Once again, thank you so much for the support. And with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. As always, peace out.